This group is conformed by Maria Sanz, Alain Romero, Maria Jose Gonzalez, and me, Mariana. And we are going to talk about fracking. We are going to be talking about first what's fracking, then the history, how it works, next why fracking is used, and finally what are the main problems of fracking.
What is hydraulic fracturing, or fracking? Since the Industrial Revolution, our energy consumption has risen unceasingly. The majority of this energy consumption is supplied by fossil fuels like coal or natural gas. Recently, there's been a lot of talk about a controversial method of extracting natural gas, hydraulic fracturing, or fracking. Put simply, fracking describes the recovery of natural gas from deep layers inside the earth. In this method, porous rock is fractured by the use of water, sand, and chemicals in order to release the enclosed natural gas. The technique of fracking has been known since the 1940s. Nonetheless, only in the last 10 years has there been quite a fracking boom, especially in the USA. This is because most conventional natural gas sources in America and on the European continent have been exhausted. Thus, prices for natural gas and other fuels are rising steadily. Significantly more complicated and expensive methods, like fracking, have now become attractive and profitable. In the meantime, fracking has already been used more than 1 million times in the USA alone. Over 60% of all new oil and gas wells are drilled by using fracking. Now, let's take a look at how fracking actually works. First, a shaft is drilled several hundred meters into the earth. From there, a horizontal hole is drilled into the gas-bearing layer of rock. Next, the fracking fluid is pumped into the ground using high-performance pumps. On average, the fluid consists of 8 million liters of water, which amounts to about the daily consumption of 65,000 people, plus several thousand tons of sand and about 200,000 liters of chemicals. The mixture penetrates into the rock layer and produces innumerable tiny cracks. The sand prevents the cracks from closing again. The chemicals perform various tasks. Among other things, they compress the water, kill off bacteria, or dissolve minerals. Next, the majority of the fracking fluid is pumped out again. And now the natural gas can be recovered. As soon as the gas source is exhausted, the drill hole is sealed. As a rule, the fracking fluid is pumped back into deep underground layers and sealed in there. However, fracking is also associated with several considerable risks. The primary risk consists in the contamination of drinking water sources. Fracking not only consumes large quantities of fresh water, but in addition the water is subsequently contaminated and is highly toxic. The contamination is so severe that the water cannot even be cleaned in a treatment plant. Even though the danger is known and theoretically could be managed, in the USA already sources have been contaminated due to negligence. No one yet knows how the enclosed water will behave in the future, since there have not yet been any long-term studies on the subject. The chemicals used in fracking vary from the hazardous to the extremely toxic and carcinogenic, such as benzol or formic acid. The companies using fracking say nothing about the precise composition of the chemical mixture. But it is known that there are about 700 different chemical agents which can be used in the process. Another risk is the release of greenhouse gases. The natural gas recovered by fracking consists largely of methane, a greenhouse gas which is 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Natural gas is less harmful than coal when burned, but nonetheless, the negative effects of fracking on the climate balance are overall greater. Firstly, the fracking process requires a very large consumption of energy. Secondly, the drill holes are quickly exhausted, and it's necessary to drill fracking holes much more frequently than for classical natural gas wells. In addition, about 3% of the recovered gas is lost in the extraction and escapes into the atmosphere. So how is fracking and its expected benefits to be assessed when the advantages are balanced against the disadvantages? When properly employed, this technique offers one way in the short to medium term to meet our demand for lower-cost energy. But the long-term consequences of fracking are unforeseeable, and the risk to our drinking water thus should not be underestimated.
What's fracking or hydraulic fracturing? The technique for extracting natural gas from conventional reservoirs is called fracking. It tries to exploit the gas accumulated in the fissures of certain fine or sedimentary rocks, usually a clay or loamy, very fine grain, whose little permeability prevents migration of large packets of methane hydrocarbons. For it is hundreds of wells required to occupy large areas and inject millions of liters of water loaded with chemical and toxic cocktail to remove it. Now we have here an illustration of how it works. Here we have the well tail that passes here, and when it is done, when the gas is extracted, the wastewater storage is on here in the top of in that part. History. The underground injections to facilitate oil extractions dating back to 1860 in the North America East Coast, by then using nitroglycerin. In 1930, they began to use acid instead of explosive. But in 1947, when starting for the first time the possibility of using water. This method was implemented industrially in 1949 by the company Stanley Oil. Currently, it considered to George P. Mitchell as the father of the modern industry fracking. To achieve economic viability to the site known as Barnett Shale, reducing cost to 4 per million British thermal units. His company, Mitchell Energy, got the first commercial hydraulic fracturing in 1998.
Continue with how this works. Hydraulic fracturing is performed a previously constructed case and cemented well, which can be vertical or horizontal. Then this technique is to generate one or more channels of high permeability through the injection water with high pressure. So, water upon the resistance of the rock and a control don't hold in the red selection of the fracture containing hydrocarbon formation in order to avoid the natural fracture containing. At the time, the hydraulic pressure to keep its open relaxed point together with water and iron support typically sands which keeps the fracture open on a permanent basis. A typical composition of fracturing is generated about 95 to 98% water. It is not necessarily potable, incorporating to 5% sand and support the less than 1% of chemical such as bactericide, friction, reduce the thickness, and pharmaceutical, cosmetics, food industry, etc. And then, next questions. Why fracking is useful? Fracking is not a new technique. It has been used in the United States since decades ago. This technique is reused today by the depletion of conventional energy sources and for increase the energy consumption. What are the main problems of fracking? Problems of fracking involves a series of environmental impacts. For instance, the emission of gases or for example, the contamination of groundwater, air pollution, noise pollution, emission of greenhouse gases, contamination of landscapes, and those effects in the use of water and the land use. Especially fracking causes problems in the earthquakes induced by seismicity and landscape impacts. Continue with the questions. What are the advantages of fracking? Fracking increases the rate at which water, petroleum or natural gas can be recovered from subterranean wells. It has also allowed the extraction of unconventional oil and gas resources from a low permeability sites where traditional extraction technologies fail. Fracking as a method for oil and gas extractions is also more economically viable than conventional or horizontal drilling. In the United States, those domestic oil production has grown significantly, and with the introduction of fracking, the process has driven down gas prices and offered gas security to both the United States and Canada about 100 years.
Bueno, yeah. What are the main problems of fracking? In the main problems of fracking, we have problems with the water and problems with the atmospheric pollution. First of all, let's talk about the main problems of fracking with the water. With the water, we have 2 points. The first point is that the hydraulic fracturing process consumes huge amounts of water. And when I say huge, it's huge amounts of water. It has been estimated that it requires between 9,000 and 29,000 cubic meters of water. And this could cause obviously problems with the sustainability of water resources and even in temperate countries. And the consumption obviously increase the pressure supply in the driest areas. The other point is that very little is known about the environmental dangers associated with the chemicals that the scientists and the engineers have to add to the fluids. I mean, when in the fracturing process, the engineers and the scientific has to mix the water with some chemicals, and the real question is, what happened with this water that has been mixed with some chemicals if we can drink it? Why? When they are going to put this water? So very little is known about the dangers, about the environmental dangers of this point. The main problems of fracking with the atmospheric pollution is that some scientific has registered benzene, and the benzene is a potent carcinogen. And also the other point is the steam coming out of the evaporation pits, where often fracking wastewater are stored. And the final point is the leaking gas wells and pipelines that also contribute to gas emissions and increasing greenhouse gases emissions.
A certain amount of sand is included to avoid the fractures close when the pumping stop, and also is added around 2% of additive, composed of between 3 and 11 chemical additives, according to some sources close to the hydraulic fracturing industry.